Hello BookTube, I'm Heather and this is Recently Seen Reading, and Friday has rolled around yet again. I've missed a couple of Fridays, but we're going to give Friday another go because we're going to keep trying to get the habit reestablished. So what have I been reading? What have I finished in the last couple of weeks? A variety of things. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but maybe talk about 3 of them. I finished Emma Donoghue's most recent novel, The Paris Express. So it's a story of a train full of people traveling from, I think, the north of France to Paris in the late 19th century. Yes, 19th century. And Donoghue's attention shifts from car to car to car and back, and from character to character. So it's a novel essentially of very short, often quite vivid character descriptions and vignettes. And the strength of it is in those character vignettes and descriptions. Some of them are quite interesting. And that's also the novel's limitation. It's a novel that starts when the train leaves and stops when the train, well, there's an accident at the end of it. When the train stops, there's very little at the end of it. So the stories of all the characters who you can become invested in quite easily because Donoghue has a skill at character description. There's nothing more to go on. They're all chance fleeting encounters. And I can see why you would want to write something like that, and I can see Donoghue's skill in compression, in compressing a lot of information about particular people into very tight time frame and tight word count. But I found the novel frustrated me in the end because I wanted to know more about all the individual characters. Not a bad problem to have with the book. Let's see, what should we talk about next? How about Sarah Franklin's recent biography called The Editor, which is a biography of Judith Jones. I don't have a copy here with me. I returned it to the library. This is a biography of Judith Jones, who was an editor for Knopf in New York from the mid-50s to the early 2010s. She died, I think, 2010, 2012, and she worked a very long time. She worked well into her 70s. And you probably won't have heard of Jones unless you're really interested in the history of cookbook publishing or in the publishing industry. She essentially revolutionized the way cookbooks were written, designed, and published. She worked, for example, with Julia Child on mastering the art of French cooking. And so it was part of that leading edge of bringing European styles or even South Asian styles of cooking into North American home kitchens. And so she had a significant and pivotal role in that cultural sea change. And the biography, as written, is a competent biography. It's smoothly written. It has some flaws, and they're probably flaws that most people wouldn't be bothered by, but I found myself frustrated when the bibliography makes points to, I don't know, a popular press newspaper article about something, a person who had been accused of rape, a man long dead. I don't even remember his name, but I find that kind of referencing problematic. If your biography is going to mention these kinds of things, and I have no doubt that these kinds of things happened, they need to be grounded in more solid citation practices, essentially. I find myself very skeptical of historical accounts of any kind, whether it's a literary history or biography or straightforward history or social history, anything that grounds its citations in what I assume the author believes to be easily accessible newspaper articles, to be a little suspect. And I think that's one of the weaknesses of Franklin's biography of Judith Jones. And it's also far too glowing an account. There are dark spots in Jones' life that Franklin, who knew her and did an oral history project with her, is reluctant to go up to and look at Hard or to describe Hard. And I understand that. So that is its limitations as a biography. But if you're interested in the publishing industry of the period and the roles women played in that industry, or the history of how cookbooks were shaped and formed and came to be a significant part of any publisher's business, it's worth a read. But don't go to it looking for really solidly grounded and cited history. It's not that kind of biography. That's not going to bother most people, right? What else did I finish? This one has to go back to the library. This is Nick Harkaway's Karla's Choice, which is a continuation of his father's Karla story. So his father was John le Carré, David Cornwall. And this is competently done. They're familiar characters who behave in familiar ways, and you will be able to hear Alec Guinness's voice in here, and you'll see similar pressures in John Hurt's voice. You'll be able to hear those voices, so it's well done in that sense. I don't think he has the same deft touch in describing a setting as his father has. He brings a different kind of energy to the female characters. Le Carré often makes short work of the women in his books. Not very curious about the lives of the women in the Smiley novels, and Harkaway is far more curious about the women characters, and so he gives them bigger, fuller life stories, and that's interesting. It's not actually Le Carré-esque, I suppose, but can be a satisfying thing to read in an espionage novel. Is it as good as his father's Smiley novels? No. Is it worth a read of a weekend when you want some light reading? Yes. I'm not unhappy that I've picked that up and finished it. So that's what I've finished. I have a problem lately, borrowing a lot of books and getting parts right through a lot of them and not finishing them, putting one aside and picking up another, picking up one, putting one down. So it's making my reading a little bit, Higgledy-piggledy, a little bit all over the place, but that's okay. So I've started this. This is, I'm gonna get it in the frame, there we go. This is Elizabeth Inchbald's A Simple Story, and I picked this up in June to get ahead of some Jane Austen in July reading. This is a story of Miss Milner and her guardian, and it's on my reading pile because it's one of the novels that Jane Austen quite admired. And I've read about Inchbald, and I don't think I've ever read one of her novels before, so this has been on my shelf for years, like decades, and now I'm picking it up. It's a different kind of world than the world you'll find in Austen, and the prose is very different. I wouldn't come to it expecting to have Austen-like sentences, but it's interesting in how stagey it is. You can see Inchbald's career as an actress popping through. The bits with dialogue are quite lively and quite interesting. The other bits can be a little bit slow so far, but I'm about, a quarter of the way through that, so I'm hoping to finish that in the next couple weeks. What else do we have here? Yes, this one, The Light Years. This has been on my library hold list for a long time, and I'm starting to get through some of those. So this one I'm about halfway through. This came out, I think, in the 60s or 70s. Let's see. I don't remember. I should have checked. 1990. Way off on the date on that one. So this is Elizabeth Jane Howard's first volume of a long story about the Cazalet family. And this one is a story of, how would you describe it? The big house. The gentry family where everyone comes from London for the summer or summer stretches to stay with the grandparents in a massive house with a whole cast of servants. It's quite lively. It reads very quickly. There are kind of dire elements in it because life has dire elements in it, but its tone on the whole is not dire. So if you like, say, Olivia Manning's writing, but don't want something as dark as sometimes Manning can be, Howard, at least in this one, might be a good fit for you. So I'm enjoying this. I'm reading this in the mornings before I read the news and all of that, and hope to get through that in the next couple of weeks. The portraits of children in it are quite lively. Quite lively. What else? I've just started this one. This is Anne Fleming's Curiosities. This was nominated either for the Governor General's or the Giller. Came out last year, and it's a historical novel set in the early 1600s, and it's a novel taken up with essentially cross-dressing in many ways, where the characters move across gender and sex boundaries back and forth, and they're also moving, I think, in the second two-thirds of the novel from England to North America or Canada. What can I say about this one? First of all, the typeface is very odd. That's not important. It's very odd. It's smoothly written. It's trying to use kind of 16th century, 17th century word forms, but it's not particularly convincing in that. I think she could have done without that. The author is Anne Fleming. I think she could have dropped that and the novel would have been just as interesting. I think this one I will actually finish. I had a number I haven't finished, but I suspect that Daniel Dutton's Margaret the First will turn out to be a better novel with similar sorts of topics and characters and time frames. But a third of the way through that one. And lastly, and not leastly, is this one. This is In a Lonely Place by Dorothy Hughes. This came out in 1947, and it's a noir novel. And I've never read Dorothy Hughes before, and I picked this one up randomly, essentially. And I'm having to read it quite slowly because it's much creepier than I expected it to be. I mean, I read lots of mystery fiction and lots of dark stuff, but there's something about this one that's just creepy. The narrative is filtered through a main character whose name is Dix, and it's set in California, and there's a serial murderer on the loose, and at this point the question is still, is the strangler going to be caught, and how likely is it that Dix is the strangler? Pretty likely. And there's just this sense of impending doom and peril for all the women characters. A little bit around the men characters too, but mostly it's the women who are in peril in this. It's kind of like a cross between Raymond Chandler and Patricia Highsmith. So, yeah, what's the name of that novel? Oh, it's gone from me. But this kind of, the Ripley novels, the character in here and the approach to narrative voice is very similar to Highsmith. I think Highsmith learned a lot from Dorothy Hughes. And it's incredibly creepy for a short little noir novel set in California. I think this has been filmed many times, so I hope to finish that this week because I've been dawdling on it because I get creeped out. It doesn't make good bedtime reading, and it's not the kind of thing I want to read first thing in the morning. So that's my reading from the last couple of weeks. A couple of interesting books that I thought were good or just merely interesting, and a stack of novels that I need to work through that I keep picking up, putting down. I hope you've had a good reading week, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.